The Good Place is one of the most interesting shows on television. Not only does it explore morality, ethics, and what it takes to live a good life, but it features one of the greatest twists in all of television.
I can't believe you figured it out.
This is going to be a massive spoiler, by the way. Eleanor Shellstrap wakes up in the afterlife, which we soon find out consists of a good place and a bad place.
We're in the good place.
As Michael, the architect of her paradisal neighborhood, soon explains, pretty much every religion got the afterlife wrong. The closest to being right, apparently, was a guy named Doug Forsett, who described the afterlife with 95% accuracy while he was high on acid one time. Life runs on a point system, and every single thing you do adds or subtracts from your overall score. Get enough points, and you get to heaven. Don't earn enough, and it's time to prepare for an eternity of butthole spiders in the bad place. Each neighborhood is perfectly designed to fit its residents based on how they lived on Earth, and each of them is paired up with their soulmate. But it doesn't take long for us to learn that Eleanor has been sent to the good place by mistake. In her real life, she was a nightmare of a person to be around. Eleanor reveals this to her fake soulmate Chidi, which puts him in a very awkward position. On Earth, Chidi was a professor of moral philosophy, and the last time he told a lie, it tortured him for 3 years. Now he is faced with an impossible moral dilemma. He can either lie to everyone in the neighborhood, possibly condemning himself to hell in the process, or he can turn Eleanor in, dooming her to an eternity of aforementioned butthole spiders. Eleanor begs Chidi to teach her how to be a better person, swearing that she will earn her spot in the good place. This promise to be better is immediately challenged.
Who died and left Aristotle in charge of ethics?
Plato.
Eleanor hates being around people who think they are better than her, and in the afterlife, everyone seems to be her moral superior. Her neighbors Tahani and her soulmate Jianyu, for instance. Tahani raised billions of dollars for charity in her years of philanthropy, and Jianyu was a Tibetan monk who spent nearly his entire life in a vow of silence. Except it turns out Jianyu, like Eleanor, has been brought here by mistake. His real name was Jason, and he was a petty criminal from Jacksonville. And he's a moron. Fearing he will break their cover, Eleanor persuades Chidi to teach Jason ethics as well. All these mistakes happen because it is the first neighborhood Michael has designed, and the errors have some massive side effects. This presents an even stronger moral dilemma for Chidi and Eleanor, whose deception is tearing apart the neighborhood. As this knot of moral uncertainty reaches its climax, we finally get the big reveal that Michael is actually an architect for the bad place, and the 4 of them have been brought here to torture each other. Looking back on it, there were plenty of clues. From the moment the show begins, everything is not quite right in paradise. There are stores on every corner with frozen yogurt instead of ice cream. Pizza parlors that only serve pizza with pineapple. And if you want some refreshments, residents can stop by the fountain of clam chowder. It is tough to say which version of hell would be worse. If we died and were immediately brought to hell, we would probably be resigned to our fate pretty quickly. But having paradise within our grasp and never being able to reach it would drive us insane. Actually, the butthole spiders would probably be way worse, but this idea of torturing ourselves and each other calls to mind a great quote from John Milton's epic Paradise Lost, where he says, "The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven." What is being suggested in this passage is that heaven and hell both coexist in the mind. He is putting the emphasis on this life, and how some people make their surroundings seem heavenly, despite the sorrows and difficulties they face, while others bring hell with them wherever they go. The show itself is based on a play by Jean-Paul Sartre called No Exit, in which 3 deceased characters are punished by being locked into a room together for eternity. It is in Sartre's play that we get the famous line, "Hell is other people," a quote that he says is constantly being misunderstood. He is not saying that people are inevitably cruel and evil. He is saying that we cannot really know ourselves without taking how we are regarded by others into account. Other people are so important to us because we cannot complete the puzzle of who we are without them. Much of the plot is focused on how the characters torture each other, but what they found in each other was simply an amplification of those aspects which they despised most in themselves. Their torment came from the fact that the afterlife was a continuation of the same self-destructive patterns that had kept each of them miserable on Earth.
I'm not that selfish.
Eleanor, your cocaine and escape train are ready.
Not now.
If each character had remained trapped within their own self-sabotage, then it is likely that the torture would have lasted forever. But Michael's grand plan fails, as it all rested on his certainty that Eleanor would selfishly do anything to avoid being found out. But she is able to break out of her self-centered ways and confesses to being brought to the good place by mistake, throwing a wrench in the entire plan. Michael is forced to repeatedly wipe their memories to see if he can keep the torture going longer, but the same thing keeps happening. Eleanor constantly figuring out their situation can be interpreted as her ability to consciously recognize her own self-sabotage. And by doing this, she is able to break free of its hold on her. For Eleanor, learning about ethics actually works, and it seems to be the catalyst for her becoming a better person. Was it her lessons on ethics that made the difference, or could it have been the initial decision to truly devote herself to living a better life? And reading about moral philosophy was simply her vehicle for pursuing that. It is unclear whether reading about ethics actually makes you a better person. One of the running jokes on the show is how much people hate moral philosophers. Chidi spent his entire life devoted to living a virtuous life, and the end result was that it made himself and the people around him miserable. Chidi is clearly a parody, as most philosophy students don't spend 2 hours deciding which brand of muffin would be the most ethical choice. But there is a stage in learning philosophy where you need to immerse yourself in every philosophical viewpoint. And this can actually make you more confused than you were before. But people who stick with it will likely find themselves accepting some views and rejecting others. Students and philosophy professors are uncertain about all kinds of things, but having some principles for making decisions in hard situations can make you more decisive. The question of how to be good is such an abstract idea, and because life is so complicated, any rigid worldview is bound to fail. Each character shows how devoting yourself to one limited branch of philosophy is doomed to failure. Take utilitarianism, which says that it is only the consequences of your actions and not your intentions that matter. If this were the pinnacle of virtue, then Tahani would have been sent to heaven and not to hell. Instead, she ends up in the bad place because all the good she did was for selfish reasons. We've already discussed how Chidi's strict obedience to the principles of Kant has made him miserable. Kant's unconditional honesty would seem ridiculous to most of us. We would probably feel okay morally if we lied to the Gestapo to hide our family, or if we lied to a bunch of demons to save our friends from an eternity of torment. But Chidi still feels like this is wrong. Jason shows us that ignorance of moral values is not an excuse to be bad. In the end, it is Eleanor who rejects moral absolutes. To live is to be confronted with problems, each of them infinitely and uniquely complex. And we almost never have the luxury to sit down and map out every possible consequence of our actions. Take Chidi, for example. He is probably not the only student of philosophy to spend hours dissecting the famous trolley problem. In a hilarious scene where he is forced to enact this problem in real life, he realizes how useless all this contemplation really was. Side note, I wonder how Michael, an immortal demon, would answer the trolley problem.
So I would dangle a sharp blade out the window to slice the neck of the guy on the other track as we smush our 5 main guys. Oh.
Eleanor's case is particularly interesting because her initial motivations, to save herself from eternal damnation, are not ideal. But even though she takes up the task of living a better life for selfish reasons, going through the motions and internalizing what it means to be good seems to make her good. It is Eleanor who takes these principles and makes them the way she lives her life. She is the one who knows when to throw out what it says in the book and follow her intuition. In the end, it is Eleanor who proves she has broken out of her self-destructive patterns when she is the only one of the 4 to pass her test to get into heaven. She truly shows how far her transformation has come when she lies to the others and says she failed the test. She does this because they had made a pact that either all of them or none of them would get into the good place. Knowing they would force her to go if they knew the truth, Eleanor hides this in order to keep her promise to her friends. Eleanor was able to rise above her self-destructive behavior, and because of this, the people around her ceased to be hell, and instead became her greatest source of inspiration. If this video inspired you guys to pick up one of those dusty old philosophy books, but you're not sure where to start, try Plato's Republic. Plato was so influential that Alfred North Whitehead said that all of Western philosophy was simply footnotes to Plato. You can get the audiobook for free when you sign up for a free trial at Audible by going through the link in the description or by going to audible.com/thinkbiganimation.